Genesis chapter 15, we want to look at verses 7 through 11. Genesis chapter 15, verse 7 through 11. Here's what the word of the Lord says. Then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it? So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought all of these to him and cut them in two down the middle, and placed each piece opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And when the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. This is the word of God for the people of God. Amen. For the time that is ours to share together today, I want to talk from the simple subject, time to grow up. It's time to grow up. My brothers and sisters, it is my sincere prayer today that by this stage in life, we all have some idea of what faith really is. Hopefully, we all understand that faith is that unyielding belief that keeps us from giving up despite what things look like or even feel like. Prayerfully, by this stage in our lives, we have come to truly understand that faith is having the ability to hold on because you know that at some point things will get better. Now the truth is, we all can have our own understanding of what faith is and how it is to be defined. But the question and the reality is, as believers, we have to really come to the place where we ask ourselves, what does God say faith is? What does the Bible teach us about faith? Well, the Bible says in the book of Hebrews, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, and it is the evidence of things not seen. Now, my brothers and sisters, although this is true, did you know that faith is something that is ever changing? The truth that I want to get over to us today is that if you are actually maturing and growing in the Lord as you should be, then the faith you have today should be greater than the faith you had the moment you initially believed. Now, of course, the ability to exercise faith as well as the faith to exercise are already in you. You may not see it, you may not believe it, but it is there nonetheless. And I want to suggest to you right here that faith is like a muscle. A muscle is a part of the body that the more you use it, the more you exercise it, the larger and stronger it actually becomes. That is actually why the Lord allows us to face and deal with difficult places and spaces in our lives, because He is actually helping us to grow in our faith. I sincerely believe today that this reality is actually playing out in the life of this man who has been the focus of this sermon series for the last 8 weeks. All through his life, up until this point, we have seen this play out in his life. Remember, Abram, he started out following God by faith. And although this was actually a remarkable feat in and of itself, this wasn't the only time that he needed to exercise this key element called faith. Up until this point, this is actually the 5th time that his faith in God would actually be challenged and developed, because this is the 5th time that he is going to be confronted. This is the 5th time that he has to deal with what is perceived as a problematic situation. And all of these times, it has been given to him so that his faith would grow. Let us all be reminded that it is by faith that this man Abram journeyed with the Lord, and it has been by faith that he lived. He has followed God based on a simple promise, and that promise was that he would receive land and he would produce heirs. In my opinion, he has exercised great faith. However, in the eye of God, this act of faith up until this point is really nothing more than spiritual kindergarten. I say that because the truth of the matter is that the Lord has some even greater challenges in store for Abram's faith. The passage we are looking at today once again deals with the matter of Abram's faith. Here we see Abram moving toward that place called maturity. Now, as I say that, I can already hear someone saying, Abram is already an old man. What do you mean moving toward maturity? I say that because we have to all remember that maturity, especially in the things of God, has absolutely nothing to do with how old you are. To be clear, there are several key elements to being spiritually mature. The one that I believe is being evidenced in the life of Abram is having the ability to grow our faith and to still trust in God. As we consider what the Lord is doing in the life of Abram in this passage, let us also consider that the Lord wants to grow us as well. He wants to move us toward maturity day by day. He wants you and I to learn every day to trust him more than we did the day before. He wants us to move to that place where we can say like the saints of old, I will trust in the Lord until I die. Please allow me to share a few thoughts that present themselves in this passage. The first thing I want to give you is the objective of this sermon. It is my objective today to get each of us to understand that our faith must have a concern. That is, faith must have a focus. We see this played out in the verses before us, and especially in verses 7 and 8. Because if you recall, last week we looked at the reality that Abram had issues with regard to the fact that he hadn't received the promise that God had given him as of yet. Now, as we look at our text, it appears to me as though God is still addressing the questions of Abram that he had in verse number 2. Because you recall there in verse 2, Abram had questions about when this great and grand promise would actually come to fruition. He, just like many of us often do, is showing a bit of impatience. And let's be honest and let's be clear, his concern from last week is to a large degree understandable, because during the time of the text last week, they didn't have a pill, because remember, he was worried about when he was going to have a child, when he would have a son. And now here it is. His concern is very understandable, because Abram is an old man now, and as I just said, they didn't have any pills that could help him out. But here it is. He may not have had a pill, but he did have something far better. He had a promise from God. In that sermon, we saw how God addressed Abram's concern of the son, but now it appears that Abram is still filled with concern. However, this time his concern wasn't with regard to legacy. It seems to be that his concern is now dealing with land, which was actually the other part of God's promise. God promised him a son. God promised him children, which is legacy. But now God also promised him that he would have land. And Abram now is worried. Abram now is concerned because he has yet to receive this promise of land. And his concern is very understandable also, because here it is. He is worried about how he is going to be able to possess the land. Now, it is interesting to me that in verse 7, the Lord reminds Abram that the way it's going to happen is that the same one who brought Abram out of Ur with the purpose of giving him this land to possess it, that same person, that same God would be the one who would give him the land. God seeks to remind Abram that if I brought you this far, I didn't bring you this far just to bring you this far. I brought you this far because I have something in store for you. But Abram needed assurance about this part of the promise as well, because at this present time there were others who occupied the land, there were others who lived in the land, and as far as Abram could tell, there was not anything happening that would help him to progress toward being able to possess it. And so he submissively and humbly asked God, how will I possess it? In response to Abram's statement, God moves to offer Abram some information that is designed to address his concerns. God's statement of response to Abram was very simple and direct. God, in his response, sought to give Abram a reminder of who it was that he was dealing with. This, my friends, is very important and will be the emphasis of this sermon today, because the truth of the matter is, just like Abram, there are times that we also need to be reminded of who it is that we have on our side. And I believe that God does this because he is seeking to actually offer some fuel for the faith of Abram, so that Abram would not think that he was believing in vain. And so God opens this section with a reminder of who he is and what he is doing. Now, here it is. We've got to take note of this, because every now and then all of us have moments where we wonder if God is going to do it. Aren't there times in all of our lives where we need to be reminded of who it is that God is being on our side? Aren't there moments in all of our lives where we need to be reminded that we have someone on our side who is able to do all things but fail? Aren't there moments in our lives where we need to be reminded that although things may look bad, things aren't going to be bad, because God is on our side? I need somebody to hold on to that, because we are going through some tumultuous times right now, and all of us are wondering, where is God in the midst of all this? Can I tell you where God is? God is the same place he was when he got you out of the trouble last time. Where is God? God is in the same place he was when you prayed to him when things were not going the way you wanted them to go the last time. God is still who he is. God is still able to do what he was able to do then. Our job is to simply trust in God. But watch what God does for Abram and for us. God gives Abram a reminder of who God is and what God is able to do. And I like that, because I believe all of us who are watching today, all of us who call ourselves children of God, all of us need to be reminded every now and then that God still has power, that God is still able, that God can still make a way out of no way. All of us still need to be reminded that although it's dark outside right now, we have a God who can turn the lights on at the moment that we need them. That all of us, we have moments in our lives where we wonder if God is going to show up, if God is going to do it. But God has to remind Abram and remind us that no matter what we go through, if God gave his word, God will do exactly what he said he would do. So God begins to remind Abram of who God is. Now watch the text, because the first reminder that God gives Abram in our text is a reminder of his person. Please take note of the fact and the way in which God refers to himself. God refers to himself as the Lord. This to me is extremely important, because the word here for Lord is actually translated as the self-existent one. God is merely reminding Abram who he is. And God is trying to get Abram to remember that I'm the same one. Nothing changes who I am. I'm self-existent. I exist in myself. I have all authority. I have all power. Nobody can control me. Nobody can dictate to me what I do. Abram, you got to understand that I am the Lord. This to me is critically important, because I believe that there are times in all of our lives when it comes to God, we honestly forget who it is that we're dealing with. and who it is that we have on our side. I think there are many times that many of us have allowed life and the very circumstances that we encounter to cause us to forget who's on our side, whose side we're actually on, not who's on our side, but whose side we're on. Because if we would allow ourselves to actually remember whose side we are on, if we would allow ourselves to actually remember that He is the one that is in control of everything in this world, if we would remember that He is the one that can speak and that which is not becomes that which is, if we would just remember that we have a God on our side who has all power in His hand, that would help us to have a certain level of confidence, because I may not be able to get myself out of it, but I have a God on my side who can deliver me from anything I'm going through. And I need somebody to understand that today. Whatever you're dealing with in life, whatever you're going through in life right now, I know all of us are going through this pandemic, and many of us are nervous about when is it going to be over, how are things going to be, and when is the medicine going to come, will the medicine work? Can I tell you something? Stop worrying about what's going on around you and put your trust in the one who has everything in His hand. When we understand that God has all things under control, it doesn't matter what it looks like, because at the end of the day, God knows how to turn it around. At the end of the day, God knows how to bring things to pass, bring things to fruition, and make all things well. That's why we need to learn how to trust Him. That's why we need to learn how to put our faith in Him, because this God of ours has the power to control everything. I love the fact that He says, I am the Lord, because when you talk about somebody being the Lord over something, they have complete control over everything that's going on. And I need somebody to get that, because if God is the Lord, if God is in complete control and He's on our side and we are on His side, if He has complete control of everything, everything will work according to His plan. And I need somebody to get that, because I know you thought things were going to go your way and then things went a different way. But isn't it interesting? Even when you thought it was going to be bad, it still worked out for your good. Isn't it interesting that the very thing that you cry over is the thing that God used to develop you? Isn't it interesting that God knows how to take all things, even things that don't look good, and make them good for us? Why? Because He's the Lord. As the Lord, everything has to bow to Him. Every circumstance has to bow to Him. Every situation has to bow to Him. Whatever He wants to happen will happen. There's a serious need for all of us to recognize the power that that name implies. Because what it implies is that we serve the one who was here before anything or anyone else. And after everything and everyone else is gone, He'll still be here. He's the one who controls everything that happens in between, time after time, over time, early time. God is the one that has complete and utter control. Watch this. And this God who is on our side, that is in control, He is powerful, He is present, and He is perceptive. I need you to catch that, because if He's powerful, no matter what I go through, He can get me out of it. No matter what it is that I'm challenged with, if God be powerful, I don't care what it is that comes against me. My God has the ability to get me out of it. But watch this. He's not only powerful, He's also present. Now, it's one thing to have and know somebody that has power, but it's another thing to have somebody who has power with you while you're going through what you go through. Here it is. Some of us know some pretty powerful people. Some of us know some people who have some influence, but isn't it interesting? The people that you know who have some influence in life, that have some power in this world, they're not always where you need them to be. But here he is, the God that I serve. He is powerful and He's present. The Bible says He's an ever-present help in the time of trouble. When I'm going through what I'm going through, I'm not going through it by myself, because God said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He will be there all also perceptive, which means he sees what I'm going through. He understands what I'm going through. And every now and then you ought to shout about that, because haven't you gone through some stuff and people said they'll be with you, but they didn't understand what you were going through, so they couldn't do nothing about what you're going through. The good news is, when you have a God like this God on our side who is perceptive, he knows what it takes to get you out of. He knows what it takes to sustain you in it. He knows what it takes to carry you through everything you're going through. You ought to lift your hands real quick and say, I thank God that he is perceptive. He knows all about it. He has the ability to get me through, and he's there to do what I need. Powerful, he's present, and he's perceptive, and he is the one who is in control of everything. If we could ever get our minds and our faith wrapped around that truth, it would revolutionize our lives. We have to understand that he is who he said he is. We have to have an understanding of the fact that this God of ours is the Lord. So the first thing we see is, the first reminder that God gives Abram and gives to us is of his person. He's the Lord. But then the second reminder that God gives him is found in verse 7. I'm still in verse 7 rather. He gives him a reminder, and he reminds Abram, watch this, of his power. Take note of what God says in this verse. God says to Abram, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans. God reminds Abram that Abram is where he is today because of the power of God. Abram did nothing to get where he was. It was all God. God is reminding Abram, here it is, that the only reason why you are where you are, the only reason why you are in the position you are in is not because of who you are, but it is simply because I'm the one that made a way for you. And I need to tell somebody in this chat today, I need to tell somebody on this stream, somebody who's watching us, I need to let you know, stop patting yourself on the back thinking that you did it all by yourself. I know you got the degree, I know you got the job, I know you bought the house, I know you got the car, but can I tell you something very real? The only reason you have the job is because God made it possible. The only reason you got the car is because God made it possible. The only reason you got the house is because God made it possible. All I'm trying to tell you is, you got to remember who it is that got you where you are. Every now and then we need to learn how to remember. You didn't get yourself here all by yourself. You didn't make yourself who you are. I know you went to school. I know you got the degree on the wall. But can I tell you, God made it possible for you to get to where you are, because there are a whole lot of people who are smarter than you. There are a whole lot of people who are more qualified than you. But God made a way for you, and every now and then we got to understand that we need to learn how to be reminded not of who we are, but of who he is. You are reminded of who he is, you begin to focus on his power. I believe God is making this known to Abram to remind him the fact that he wants Abram to remember that if the Lord is responsible, watch this, for getting him this far, Abram's responsibility is to simply trust that the same God who did that is yet able to do this. Here it is. God is saying, listen, I've got you this far. I'm the reason you are where you are. And I need you to focus and remember, you didn't bring yourself this far. And if I brought you this far, you got to trust me enough to do the rest of the way for you. You got to trust me enough. If I did this, trust me to know that I will do everything that I said. I'm talking to somebody. You've been wondering if God is going to do. You've been wondering if God is going to open the door. You've been wondering if God is going to make a way for you. But I need to let you know, he is not the God who will turn his back on his people. God will do exactly what he said. You're looking at your life today wondering how you're going to get to the place that God showed you or told you that he would take you, just look over your shoulder. Look at all the things that you have already overcome in your life. And then ask yourself, how did you make it this far? How did you get to this place in your life? If your answer is God made a way, then God is saying the same God who made a way then will make a way again. God is saying to you and to I and to me today that the same way you made it through that is the same way you'll make it through this, the power of God. Go ahead and look back at the accident that should have taken you out or should have made you crippled. God says the same way you made it through that is going to be the same way you make it through this. Go ahead, look back over your life at the multiple times the money was small and the bills were large, but no matter how large the bills were and no matter how small the money was, your light stayed on and the roof remained over your head and food was still on the table and in the cabinet. He said the same way you made it through that will be the same way you make it through this. The power of God. Go ahead, name any area of your life, and I promise you, if you're honest about it, it was all God and not you. God is trying to get us to understand that if God did all of that, we got to trust him to do it again. We got to trust his power. Can I just help somebody to understand this? Because if you look back over your life, there are a lot of things that should have taken you out a long time ago. There are a lot of things that should have wiped you out. But here it is, you're still here. You may have some scars, but listen, God allows you to have scars so you can remember it should have been a lot worse. And if it were not for the grace and power of God, you would have been taken out of here a long time ago. And God says to you, and he says to me, remember my power. Remember his person. He's the Lord, the one in full control. But also remember his power. Because it's one thing to be in control, then it's another thing to have the ability to control. It's one thing to have a position, but it's another thing to be able to function in the position. Many people desire position. Many people desire prominence, but they're not able to stay in position because they don't have the power in them to occupy the position. God says, I not only have the authority, I also have the power. But then thirdly and finally, God gives Abram and us a reminder of his plan. God goes on to remind Abram the reason he brought him out was so that he might bring him in. I like that. God reminds Abram the only reason he brought him out of Ur was to bring him in to the promise. Now I'm talking to somebody right now. You're wondering why is it that God has not moved in your life yet. I want to tell you, God is still working. And although you may not see him working, you got to believe that God does what God says he's going to do. God promised to give Abram a new land, a new legacy. God promised it. And listen, if the land has not come yet, that means Abram has just got to hold on. And so God was saying, listen, I brought you through all of that because I have a plan for your life. And I think somebody needs to hear that today. And God has a plan for your life. I know it doesn't seem like it always, but God has a plan for your life. And I just want to remind you that Abram isn't the only one that God does this for. God does not always look like that God is working. But hear me very carefully. No matter where you are right now in life, God has a plan for your life. No matter how bad it feels, no matter how tough it looks, God has a plan for your life. All you got to do is hold on to the reality that God is working. Well, here it is, and I'm done. If God has a plan for your life, You have not reached the place God told you he was taking you. Your responsibility is to simply hold on. I know it's tough, but hold on. I know you're tired sometimes, but hold on. I know it gets difficult every now and then, but I need to tell you, hold on. I know that the challenges are all around you, but my advice to you today is simply hold on. I know that you want things to be easy, but I need to tell you that you gotta still just hold on. If tears are filling your eyes, and if the burdens are on your shoulders, and if friends have walked away from you, I need to tell you, just go ahead and hold on. I know that it's not always the way you want it to be, but I need to tell you, you got to still just hold on to what God has promised you. When things get difficult, you got to hold on because God is still working. You got to hold on because even though you don't know when the Lord is going to move in your life, you got to hold on because God is still at work. And God, he has a plan for you. God has something that he's trying to get into your life. And your job is to simply say, God, here I am. I may not know what the Lord is doing. I may not know when the Lord is going to show up. I may not even know how the Lord is going to move in my life. But the one thing I know is that God, he will show up. Is there anybody watching today who can testify that God, he will show up for you? It may be hard and it may be lonely, but I believe if you hold on, the Lord, he will step in your life and he will turn things around. My God, he is able to do exceedingly abundantly and above all you can ask or think. That's why the Bible says that we have a God who will move in our life. The Bible says that when it gets difficult for you, when things are challenging your life, when God is working on your life, he says you got to remember that even when things are difficult, Romans 8:28 says that my God, he has the power to take everything that I'm going through, and he knows how to work it together to produce good in my life. The Bible says, and we know that all things will work together for the good of them that love God and are called according to his purpose. That says that God is working my bad and working my good. That God knows how to take my up days to somebody who's going through pain. It's for your good. I'm talking to somebody who's going through trials right now. It's working for your good. You're going through tests. You're going through ups. And you're going through downs. It's all working together for your good. Is there anybody watching who can thank God that He knows how to work it all together? Look back over your life. Were there times that things were bad, and you look at it now and you thank God that things were not the way you wanted them to be? I think about my own life, and I'm out of here, y'all. There were days I didn't know how I was going to make it. There were times when my pockets were empty and my bank account looked bad. And I look back now and I thank God that I had to go through it. I thank God that I had some lean days because it was in my lean days I learned how to budget. I thank God that my heart got broken because it was in those days I learned how to love on myself. I thank God when friends left me. I thank God when friends talked about me. I thank God when family wasn't around because it was in those times that I had to learn how to stand on God. I had to learn